The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
So, on our Thursday Dialogue today, we are looking deeply into how the NPA bungled this Omotoso case. After 8 years of testimonies and delays, this case against this Nigerian televangelist, Timothy Omotoso, and his co-accused ended in an acquittal for all three of them. And it's a shocking one because the judge, in fact, doesn't necessarily say these people are acquitted because maybe there's no evidence or he truly believes that the accused is not guilty, but because the NPA really just bungled this case. The judge, in fact, in this matter described the case as shallow. She criticized the unethical conduct of the prosecutors in their incompetent cross-examination. So basically, the prosecutors failed to pass the test of proving the charges beyond reasonable doubt. In fact, even the basic test of prima facie wasn't proven. So Judge Emma Skuman really was hard on the prosecution team and the NPA in how this entire case was handled. And I want us to figure out what went wrong. Because if you remember the testimonies, there was a time when through and during testimonies, people were just shocked at how someone who is supposed to be a senior leader in a church, who's supposed to be respected in community, could have treated those victims like that. So joining me now via Zoom are two journalists who've been covering this story from the onset. Siphosethu Booi, who is an Eastern Cape-based journalist with True FM, joining us via Zoom. Siphosethu, thank you so much for making time. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Clement, and to the listeners, and thank you so much for having me here.
We also have Lerato Fekisi, who's also based in the Eastern Cape, works for the SABC News. Thank you, Lerato, for also making time for us. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Clement, to you and your listeners.
And I'll bring in an advocate as well, just as we continue with this conversation. I want to hear from you as well on 011-883-0702 if you've got some thoughts around how the NPA conducted this entire trial. You can send your WhatsApps as well on 072-702-1702. Before we really start, maybe you missed what Judge Emma Skuman said as she was making a ruling on this matter. And let me just give you a sense of what she said yesterday.
The cross-examination of the accused was desultory in the extreme. No thought went into it. The trial was set down for 9 days to deal with the evidence of the defense. Accused 1 testified for a whole day, setting out his defense. But the cross-examination of accused 1 lasted less than a morning session. He was not cross-examined on his denial with reference to the complainant's testimonies. No attempt was made to elicit inconsistencies or improbabilities. His cross-examination consisted mainly of putting a very limited synopsis of the respected complainant's evidence to him, which evidence the accused denied, then putting it to him that what they testified about is correct. It is not that there had been little scope for cross-examination. There was ample evidence that the veracity of his evidence could have been tested against. The cross-examination was shallow and lacking the intention to uncover the truth. Similarly ineffectual and superficial was the cross-examination of accused 2 and 3 that amounted to no cross-examination at all. They did not deviate from their respective versions or contradicted themselves. In the instant matter, Mr. Doberman is correct that the questions asked by the prosecutors in the instant matter did not amount to cross-examination at all. The defense brought an application for a mistrial where copious affidavits were filed. Mr. Ntelwa averred in one of such affidavits that he did not know that digital penetration of genitalia constituted rape. It is inconceivable that a prosecutor with 14 years' experience that is involved in a case where rape is one of the crimes accused one faced does not know what the definition of rape is. He was either extremely incompetent or dishonest when deposing to such an affidavit. Especially so as the accused evidence was not placed in dispute through proper cross-examination. When deciding whether the state has proved its case beyond reasonable doubt, this matter falls into the category where, in my view, the explanations of the accused are improbable, and I don't subjectively believe them. However, due to the uncertainty of the actions of the state and the lack of proper cross-examination, I cannot find that the accused version are so improbable that they cannot reasonably possibly be true. The accused bore no onus to convince the court of their innocence. I am of the view, in the light of all the circumstances of the case, that the state has not proved its case beyond reasonable doubt.
Yes! Quiet, please.
The accused are found not guilty and are discharged on all the charges.
So that is the judge there, Judge Schoeman, as she was finding them basically not guilty. They're now acquitted. So let's start now with the journalists that have covered the story from the onset. And I'm interested in your initial reaction, Siphosethu. Were you surprised, like everybody else, or having covered this case and you've seen maybe this incompetence that the judge speaks of, you knew at some point that it could very well be that this matter ends up in acquittal?
Well, Clement, my initial reaction was shock. It was frustration and just disappointment more than anything. And considering the fact that we've been covering the story and since 2017 for Lerato, and to hear that everything that the witnesses had told the court has now resulted to the acquittal of the charges against the trio was quite shocking. And I must say that when the judge was reading out the judgment and just detailing where the NPA had gone wrong, I was preparing myself mentally for what is to come. So as she was going through her judgment, I knew that this case was about to take a turn. And when she did say they are acquitted of all the charges, it was in that moment when the worst feeling came by, which is shock and disappointment of what is going to happen moving forward. But more interesting for me was the fact that this is now a situation where one of the witnesses who took to the stand and shared her ordeal was inside court, one. Two, one person who was at the forefront, Clement, when this particular trial had started, Pamela Mabini, was not there to have a reaction or be in a platform where she says how she is now reacting after that particular, judgment. So it has been a very shocking yet very disappointing a day yesterday and today, because we're still trying to make sense of everything.
Lerato, how about you? Were you surprised, or at some point during this trial you saw that the NPA are messing this thing up? How did you react after this judgment yesterday?
Morning to you, Clement. I think someone who has been covering the story, I wasn't really surprised, and I'll tell you why of two instances where I wasn't surprised. The defense lawyer, Peter Doberman, Clement, has been for a long time driving the narrative that all charges against the accused must be dropped, going as far as calling for the implementation of Section 174, which is the dropping of all charges, because he said that this trial was not fair, citing the issue of former state prosecutor Nthabiseng, who recused himself from his case, and how throughout the case, Peter Doberman was trying to push the narrative that Nthabiseng had suborned witnesses to commit perjury, and was saying because the witnesses were not testifying the ultimate truth when they took the stand, but rather a watered-down version or influenced version by Nthabiseng, they could not take their evidence to be the entire truth, and based on that, their witnesses were compromised. So as time went on and that narrative was keep on coming forth, and he was standing on the same thing. I mean, Peter Doberman had pretty much nothing else to stand on but just saying that because these witnesses have been influenced, and I've got proof thereof, have been influenced by Gqeberha High Court, this case cannot stand. And then secondly, Clement, the issue of the cross-examination was a shock to me, even as a journalist, to realize that the state had 9 days, Clement, to do a proper cross-examination for the witnesses. And the power of a cross-examination is that it has the ability to start poking holes at the witness's statement. It is the prime time where the state has now got a chance to really try corner the witnesses to drive their own narrative, to try get some type of conviction or to go towards what they want to say. So when you've got 9 days on a trial that started in 2018, we've got now the ample time, 9 days given to you by the law to try and poke holes at this evidence that's before you with 32 charges. And then you only cross-examine the main witness, Omotoso, like the judge said, for the morning part. And the morning part is between 8 and 11 because at 11 o'clock we have tea. So that pretty much says that they used 3 hours to cross-examine someone who was facing 31 charges. And Clement, I'm not speaking of a cross-examination that says I try corner Clement into try to get him to admit to guilt. The cross-examination was so weak in the sense that it was literally like asking Clement, were you in Mhlanga on the 5th of October? And Clement said no. And then I moved to the next question. So for her to call it disastrous, and the judge says that the disastrous was perfectly correct because it wasn't a thing where we thought as journalists that were being cross-examined, they were being tested, they were being trying to get a certain narrative for them to go by. It was literally asking questions, Clement. Did you insert your finger into this person? No, I didn't. Move on to the next question. And then you ask yourself, these were lawyers chosen by the NPA, the best of the best lawyers in this case to present a trial that has got international coverage. And they used 3 hours to cross-examine one of the biggest witnesses in this case, Omotoso. And then the other 2 witnesses as well, Clement, when they got to cross-examine Uzukiswa and also Lusandra, it was the same thing, posing one-word questions, getting one-word answers, and that's a wrap. And then you have to use that as a judge, as the basis of your judgment. They were not going to lose. They stood no chance at all when you look at the 2 things I've cited.
Yeah, and the judge did say that, it's not that I believe that this accused is not guilty, but this is not about what I believe or not. In court, we deal with evidence, and you've got to prove your case. Siphosethu, I'm just getting shocked as Lerato just explains how terrible of work the NPA executed here. One of the things that surprised me was when the judge mentioned that how is it that a prosecutor cannot know the definition of rape and that rape included penetration in its very core definition. Is that a moment that surprised you guys as well as you were covering this matter? I don't know how the NPA even explains that.
That's true. Like Lerato has explained in brief detail, Clement, it was shocking, but more, what was more shocking was the fact that you get to understand terms in law that you yourself are learning about them for the first time. And now you're trying to make sense of what exactly should happen. Like she's saying, that it was a very sad case, but also it was shocking that it only took such a while for the NPA to even consider maybe resourcing a bigger team to help with the case. And I think more what was also shocking, Clement, you remember in 2019 that the defense lawyer Peter Doberman had argued that the PE High Court at the time had no jurisdiction to hear 7 rape and sexual assault charges were allegedly occurred in PE. So there were lots of issues that one would have thought that maybe the NPA would, prove and come forward with more evidence that could possibly give weight to the case. So it was shocking, more than anything, very disappointing at the same time. Remember, this has been a case that has started in 2017, and to get to the 2nd of April of 2025, and 3 people who these witnesses bravely took to the stand and shared what happened to them, placing the accused in their stories, and then the NPA comes in and does not protect or defend or state their case authentically to hold with the case was quite shocking. It was shocking and disappointing, Clement.
Yeah. What happens now? Lerato, I don't know if you guys heard anything from Omotoso himself. Is he planning to sue the state? Because, I mean, what stops him from doing that? Having spent so many years behind bars and the state still being unable to prove beyond reasonable doubt the charges they brought against him. Have you, from what he said yesterday, did he indicate that he may be prepared to sue the state?
Clement, when he spoke to Omotoso yesterday, he spoke to us briefly as he was about to leave court.
Yeah.
And the two questions were posed to him as to what is the way forward now for him, and he said he wants to just go home and sleep. And then there was the issue of deportation, because you understand that he is illegally in the country and the Home Affairs have been hampering hard on that. So we have heard yesterday from the NPA spokesperson, that there is a plan to deport Omotoso back to Nigeria. We're still waiting for confirmation from Home Affairs on that. But he didn't want to confirm or speak about suing the state. Speaking to the church members, Clement, in the JDI church, there is a lot of protocol. When we were covering the case, what came out really clearly is the godlike figure that Omotoso is in that church. So when I tried to get a comment even yesterday after the judgment was read from who is a man of God or a pastor in the church who was literally in court throughout the 9 years, he said that, and I quote him as saying that Papa, which is Omotoso, has spoken to you guys in court, and whatever he says is the law, and we don't speak after that. So even getting a comment from the church as to what the way forward is becoming quite tough, because they are of the view that until Omotoso, who is the godlike father figure in the church, allows them to, the church won't speak as well. So the only thing we have now is the confirmation from the from the NPA, confirming that Omotoso will be deported. The time frames thereof, we're not too sure, waiting for Home Affairs to confirm that. But in terms of suing the state, we have no word yet from JDI or Omotoso if that's going to happen.
Yeah. Siphosethu, you guys sat through the testimony of these witnesses, particularly Cheryl. And I mean, some of the things that she shared were devastating, of what they were subjected to. Just help our listeners remember how critical those testimonies were, especially Cheryl's testimony. And where does this leave her? I know she was there in court yesterday. What did she say? She must be devastated herself.
Clement, you will remember that Cheryl Zondi was one witness who the entire country and the world heard give testimony, and she took to the witness stand and she detailed graphically what had happened to her. And this made the story very interesting but sad at the same time, because remember, Omotoso, like Lerato was saying, that was deemed as a leader, a church leader. He is a respected man who his congregants came out in their numbers to support him inside court, and some were outside of court declaring their love and support for him, calling him Papa and the man of God. And now here comes Cheryl Zondi sitting at the witness stand detailing what she allegedly experienced in the hands of Omotoso. So the case at this point, or at the time, was so intense and tense to an extent that she herself had said in an interview with my media colleagues on Lerato, talking about how they went through so much judgment, and people were having an opinion about what had happened. They had their own story about her story, and they were sharing it on social media. So moving forward for her looks sad, as well as other witnesses, and it sends a message, like the same message she sent, that their duty or their motive to come forward to share their story was to ensure that they put a stop to what they alleged Omotoso had done to them. So what does life look like for some of those members of the JDI congregants who came out in their full support, women, female, as well as young girls, Clement? So this is a story that looks sad for other witnesses as well in our country, who sit and wonder if whether or not they should come forward and share their stories as well. So life for Cheryl is going to change like it changed back in 2017, but for the worst, one would assume.
Yeah. Lerato, and during that testimony as well, how did the prosecuting team handle that one? Did they maximize on that time that Cheryl Zondi was on the stand to try really convince the judge that this man is guilty?
Absolutely. I think that when it got to Cheryl Zondi, her cross-examination by the defense was, one of them was painful because obviously the defense was trying to water down her testimony and perhaps change her charge of rape to just an insertion of a finger. Because the first time with Cheryl where she became graphic and they wanted the graphic detail because they wanted to prove was there a finger insertion, was there penetration, did his private parts reach certain private parts internally with you as well. So in terms of the state, they were obviously trying to drive a narrative here that there were penetrations. And the defense throughout Cheryl's case tried to show that, even tried to define what penetration is. Asked her, did you feel his private part next to your thigh? And that was the painful part of her specific examination because the state was trying to show that his private part did go inside her. And they even asked her, and you must remember now, this is someone who has to remember what happened to her 9 years ago, which must be just traumatizing in itself and trying to remember those graphic details. But the state did do the utmost, I feel, with Cheryl Zondi to try show the case that the state or the law in this instance that it wasn't just an insertion of a finger like he did with the other victims, but with Cheryl, his penis, to use that word, was what was inserted into her, and that's how it became penetration, not just an insertion of the finger. So I think the state did well with Cheryl Zondi by showing the court that this wasn't just a man who, like the other girls, touched their boobs or made them massage his feet. With Cheryl specifically, they had sex. He raped her. Even after they had sex, Cheryl spoke about how Omotoso lay on her, and after that prayed, and he ejaculated, and then he prayed and asked her to go wash herself, and then he said that God must forgive them for their sins, as if Cheryl was a willing participant in this, and she was never that at all, as she alleges, and she was 13 and a minor, and perhaps would never ever allude or never want to part of that. So the state did very well in trying to push the narrative that this man didn't, like the other girls, just touch private parts, but with Cheryl, there was specific penetration of the penis that even went as far as she alleged touched the tip of her vagina.
It's now 11:30.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
Right, let's go to your calls now and WhatsApps 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702.
Hi, Clement. You see that the NPA was really destroyed in the days of state capture. And I don't think they've managed to rebuild it. We saw an exodus of senior NPA prosecutors, people who had proper experience. And we're expecting that Shamila Batoyi, when she comes, is going to rebuild the NPA. I don't think she has managed to do that at all. And the other thing that becomes complex, the fact that an NPA that is weak actually favors politicians to some extent because they face all these criminal charges and then they get away with it when they go there. So you actually wonder if there is a political will to strengthen the NPA, as we know that it will end up biting them if it has enough teeth to do that. So it's shocking, but Shamila Batoyi, I think she needs to go.
Just saying these people just stuffed it up on purpose and had no interest in finding out the truth. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Ibrahim, Cape Town. Thank you.
Yeah, but did they mess it up on purpose? I'm not sure. What would be, why, for what? How would they benefit from that? And yeah, what you said there about the NPA and how it's really just the prosecutors, their behavior in some of these important matters is really disappointing. You'll remember the New Lane investment case where that also ended in acquittal in the Free State High Court. The judge in that matter said it was a comedy of errors. And here's what was significant about that matter. That was the first ever state capture case. The NPA needed to get that right. And that was a case that hinged on the NPA getting the Gupta family back to South Africa. to stand trial. Remember that Gupta extradition? It hinged on this case that the NPA bungled. The judge in that matter said it was a comedy of errors. That's why she described the NPA case. Why? Because the state couldn't prove their case. In fact, the suggestion from the judge was that the case was bungled. What does this mean for the NPA? What does this mean for these critical cases that are being prosecuted? It's really disheartening. What that judge said was quite shocking. Now in the Eastern Cape, but also in the Free State as well. I want to go to some of the WhatsApp texts that have come through, and then I'm going to bring in the next guest who's joining us. Sibonga Konke says, I believe that there's a lack of quality prosecutors in the NPA. In fact, in all government departments, there's quantity instead of quality. The rich can afford quality lawyers. That's a message there from Kulani. And that's the thing. There's, in fact, an impact on access to justice, on the administration of justice. It can be that if you've got a lot of money, you stand a better chance of staying out of jail, not because you may not be guilty, but because you just have money to hire the very best of lawyers who are going to trample down on the state's case against you. Like he says, Clement, what happened in the Omotoso case confirms that what I've always been telling everyone. Prosecutors and investigators decide in a very corrupt relationship whether a case goes to court or use the method of deliberately misleading the investigation and weaken the case so that when it gets to court, it is dismissed. This is a new way to compromise a case deliberately rather than making the docket disappear, which has been the case in the past. But now dockets can be reconstructed because they are kept in computers. It is not always that they fail to bring a strong case, but a deliberate act if a matter has attracted too much public interest. I still don't get that. I mean, it doesn't work for them. So if a matter has attracted a lot of public interest like this, in fact, there's more reason and more pressure for you to get it right. I really don't get it. Let's bring in Advocate Nthabiseng Sepanya now. Sepanya-Mogale, who's also, by the way, the chairperson of the Commission for Gender Equality. Advocate Sepanya-Mogale, thank you so much for making time for us. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement. Thanks for having us.
I just read now a second, if not third, comment from one of our listeners who feel like maybe this was always planned to mess this up on purpose. I'm not convinced because I don't see how, in turn, it benefits the NPA. But from your own observation here, are we talking about just pure incompetence, as the judge suggested in the Eastern Cape, in the Gqeberha High Court? Are we dealing with the incompetence of these prosecutors from the NPA? Or, from your reading here, the case was just too complex for them?
Clement, I think it's a multifaceted reason why this got messed up. There's a level of incompetence because some of the things that were pointed out in the judgment actually point to sheer incompetence. Then secondly, there's the overloaded prosecutors who sometimes see for the first time the case when they draw it out to take it to court the next day. The last time they saw it was when they were postponing as a result of the workload. And then thirdly, you have a situation where there is poor preparation on the part of the prosecutors themselves. And I think to some extent, poor training. There is no reason why what happened has happened. South Africa is one of those countries that has got specialized courts. We've got sexual offences courts. We've got labor courts. We've got so many other. We've got equality courts. We've got specialized courts wherein people are supposed to be experts by now in those courts, both presiding officers and the people who prosecute or who bring matters, defend matters in those cases. Thank you.
I want to remind some of our listeners of just the testimony. This is Cheryl Zondi. She was one of the witnesses, and this is really one of the things that she said that shocked many people in the country and, in fact, around the globe, around when she alleged what happened between her and Pastor Omotoso. Take a listen.
No. I didn't say I want you to apologize to me. Hearing this man, this high and mighty man, telling me that he is sorry for what he did to me would have given me closure.
Would that have been sufficient for you?
I never got it, so I don't know.
Did you think it would be sufficient for you?
It would have given me some closure.
What do you mean by closure? Do you mean that you could have put everything behind you once he had apologized?
I don't think so.
Well, what do you mean by closure?
So I think I just explained what I mean by closure.
Ma'am, you haven't explained what you meant by closure. I just want to understand what you mean by closure. Do you mean that once he had apologized, you would have been able to put everything that happened to you behind you?
I don't know. I never got the closure that I wanted, so I don't know how things would have panned out if he apologized.
You never asked him to apologize, correct?
I told him that what he did to me, I did not like. And I asked him, why was it so necessary? Why is it so necessary for you to do this? And he told me, there's no other option. It's either I'm in or out. That's what his response was.
Please just answer the question. Did you at any stage request an apology from him?
No. I didn't say I want you to apologize to me.
Thank you.
So that's Cheryl Zondi there. I'll find you that clip where she basically explained what happened when, as she alleges, she was sexually assaulted. Yesterday she was there, in fact, in court. So right after Judge Schoeman delivered her judgment, she spoke to the media afterwards.
Lies and all sorts of fabrications spread about us online when we're walking down the street. Our lives have never been the same after coming out about this. And one has to wonder, so this is what the last 8 years of our lives has come down to. The main concern wasn't even the knowing of what he did to us. It's knowing that he's not going to stop. He's going to continue doing this to other women and other girls. And that's what we wanted to stop. That's what we wanted to prevent. To say it ends with us and it's not going to go any further. But he's not going to stop. It's in his nature. And I feel that this is kind of enabling to him. I think things may only get worse from here. Definitely going to be more pompous and believe that this is an act of God. And it's not. I think we're all familiar with the fact that evil prevails in this world. And it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, that's what Cheryl Zondi said, who was one of the witnesses in this case. Advocate, what happens now? The NPA released a statement saying they're going to be considering their options. It's going to be embarrassment after embarrassment if they try even appeal this judgment, if they themselves can see that there was just shoddy work that was done.
Yeah, they say they are reading the judgment and will decide on a way forward after they have seen what entails it. But the NPA actually, there were a lot of opportunities throughout the process wherein they could have monitored this much more closely so that we don't end up with this situation. The team that was being accused, the three people that were being accused had put up a fight from day one. You remember there was a presiding officer who had to recuse herself because they went and investigated and found that there are some people who are sleeping at the B&B that is owned by the wife. And there were so many other instances where they actually showed that they are not going to go down without a fight. And that for me were like, these are supposed to be red flags wherein the NPA was supposed to have said, let's get good, experienced lawyers. But let us not forget that this prosecutor apparently has got 14 years of experience under his belt, but I'm not sure if it's sexual offenses prosecution experience or it's just generally having been a prosecutor for 14 years. So we cannot guarantee that. But there were quite a few instances where the NPA could have intervened.
Yeah. And what about do you suspect that Omotoso may want to sue the state? I mean, I suspect that's one thing that he's heavily considering right now. Because, I mean, 8 years and you come out and there's just the NPA failed to prove the charges that they brought against you, whether you had done it or not. You may just want to sue the state, and that's going to be a significant pay if he succeeds.
Yeah, but let's not forget, Clement, I actually am glad you raised that. Omotoso was not found not guilty. Omotoso was acquitted on technicalities, which is different. It's one thing to actually say we cannot fulfill the benchmarks that we have to fulfill for you to be guilty. However, we are not saying, therefore, you are not guilty. So there's a difference there. The state failed. And you must remember, even the measure of beyond reasonable doubt is quite a high test to pass. It is it's not a balance of probabilities. It is quite a high test to pass, especially against the backdrop of the fact that the crimes had happened a few years before. The witnesses were young at the time. The tension that the church members of Omotoso had put against them, you know, some of it is what Ms. Zondi just pointed out in your clip now. So there was a lot of tension there. So it's not in any way a proof of innocence on his part or on the part of the two co-accused.
So what are the options available then when a matter has been acquitted like that? What are the options available for the NPA? Is it a matter of we appeal, or is it a matter of maybe going back to the drawing board and then charging this man again?
I think it has to be a multifaceted approach. They need to appeal this. They need to look at the training of their prosecutors. They need to look at the workload of their prosecutors so that prosecutors can actually prepare. They need to look at the specialized crimes that are coming in. The fact that we've got commercial crimes there, we're supposed to be having accountants, IT specialists, and so many other people in the team of the NPA, not only lawyers. They need to review their teams in the sexual offences courts, because sexual offences could be where it's a open and shut case where there is evidence. And then there are the old cases where there is not evidence anymore, but the emotional evidence that gets presented, that has got to be interpreted by a specialist.
I see now that the Minister of Justice has, in accordance with Section 33 of the National Prosecuting Act, formally requested a comprehensive report from the National Director of Public Prosecutions to understand the factors that contributed to this outcome. So she herself, as someone who is in the department that oversees the NPA, clearly is not happy with how things unfolded here. I've got Billy Peterson says, Clement, good morning to you and your guest. I really do worry about this matter, and I hope the NPA can take it up. And we've just spoken about those options available for the NPA. And I often wonder, Advocate, what about the witnesses? You saw how brutal it was for them. Some of the questions that they were asked. You are basically, as a victim of assault, asked to relive that. I mean, there were a lot of things that they alleged on that witness stand, and to go through it, and then at the end, the matter is acquitted. I mean, that must be devastating for them.
Yeah, no, it would be, but fortunately, an appeal does not have to be a de novo matter. You don't have to start from scratch where witnesses come forward. That is a different process altogether. But Clement, it also still does have a bearing, because you must remember when this case started, there were 63 charges. And as a result of witnesses being reluctant to come forward after they saw what happened in the start and goes of this matter, a lot of them actually withdrew. That is how Omotoso and his co-accused ended up with only 32. But 32 is still a formidable number. And yet all of the 32 were acquitted. They were acquitted of all of the 32. So, yes, they will have to appeal. They can look at a review and even look at the options of the duty of the presiding officer, although that would be a very difficult route, because the presiding officer is not supposed to enter the fray willy-nilly. So when you mess up your case, you cannot rely on the presiding officer to say, hey, you're messing up. You should be knowing better. Yeah.
Sure. Advocate Nthabiseng Sepanya-Mogale, thank you so much for joining us as well for this conversation on our Thursday dialogue. It's 3 minutes before 12.